Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and one of the first podcasts on the Internet. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1396 of This Week in Amateur Radio. The 2025 ARRL Board of Directors election results are announced. We will introduce you to them. The ARRL VEC has processed almost all of the 2,500-plus license applications backlog with the FCC. The FCC says that hackers are hijacking broadcast radio station transmitter links to send fake alerts on the air. EvoHam is now up and running, providing amateurs with resources for operating all modes of digital voice. A Cape Cod pirate FM broadcaster agrees to a voluntary contribution to the FCC. December is Youth on the Air Month. Get ready for the 2025 running of the SantaNet on HF. The RSGB is looking for a volunteer accessibility champion and also begins a nationwide construction project. The ARRL issues a call for technical manuscripts. The Radio Club of America issues their 2025 awards. We will tell you who got them. And the Internet Archive tops 1 trillion web pages archived. All that and a lot more is straight ahead on today's edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will attempt to answer the question, how to make our hobby and community resilient. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, will be here with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us back to Thanksgiving week in November of 1923 as we witness amateurs setting new records and view the McMillan expedition to the North Pole operating station WNP as he finishes up with part 2 of the story entitled Scooped. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyers, AJ8B in the DX Corner with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming contests, and a lot more. That's all straight ahead as the Thanksgiving edition of North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio just outside of Albany, New York, where we had a little bit of a snowstorm the other night, and we're looking forward to a nor'easter coming on Tuesday, this is George, W2XBS.
And reporting this week from amateur station K2MST, inside the Museum of Science and Technology in downtown Syracuse, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau in Orland Park, Illinois, where snowy road conditions may delay my return trip to Florida, I'm Mike Nikolich, N9OVQ.
And reporting from the Ham Shack TV studios here in Knoxville, Tennessee, I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
Coming to you from a rather nippy but still sunny Space Coast in Florida, I'm Ed Johnson, W2PH.
And reporting from our news bureau in Sandwich, Illinois, where we're eagerly anticipating our first snowfall of the season, anywhere from 2 to 12 inches, according to the forecasters, I'm Jordan Kurtz, Kilo Echo 9, Bravo, Papa Oscar.
And reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from our Troy, New York News Bureau, where we're all still recovering from our Thanksgiving feast, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo, Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our ham radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains, where it's 29 degrees and snowing, but it looks like Christmas on our 12-foot growing tree covered with 600 tiny LEDs. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where that knocking upon your door is Old Man Winter making his presence known, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
Today's edition of This Week in Amateur Radio is 100% human.
The results of the 2025 ARRL division elections were announced on Friday, November 21st. In the ARRL Pacific Division, current director John Litz, NZ6Q, with 1,270 votes, of Stockton, California, was declared the winner, defeating Bob Vaiello, W6RGG, with 960 votes. In the Southeastern Division, current director Mickey Baker, N4MB, with 1,596 votes, of West Palm Beach, Florida, was declared the winner, defeating Tom Schaefer, NY4I, with 928 votes. Jim Vocic, K8JK, with 744 votes, and Northern Florida Section Manager Scott Roberts, KK4ECR, with 529 votes. In the Southwestern Division, current director Richard Norton, N6AA, with 1,392 votes, of Topanga, California, was declared the winner, defeating Arizona Section Manager Rick Paquette, W7RAP, with 1,388 votes. John Kitchens, NS6X, with 1,623 votes, of Somis, California, who is the Santa Barbara section manager, was declared the winner, defeating David Ginsburg, N3BKV, with 1,162 votes for the position of vice director. During August, the following incumbents and candidates were declared elected without opposition. In the Pacific Division, current vice director Carol Malazzo, KP4MD. In the Rocky Mountain Division, current director Jeff Ryan, K0RM, and Mel Parks, NM7P, who ran uncontested for the position of vice director. In the Southeastern Division, current vice director Andrew Maluzzi, KK4LWR. In the West Gulf Division, director John Robert Stratton, N5AUS, and vice director Lee Cooper, W5LHC, both already serving in these positions. Winners will assume their roles for terms beginning January 1st, 2026. Members voted online or could request paper ballots. The election was conducted by Third Party Election Service Corporation of Melville, New York, the same company that has conducted ARRL elections since 2022. ARRL is governed by its board of directors. Elections are held for 5 of the 15 ARRL divisions each year for terms of 3 years.
The ARRL VEC has processed most of the backlog of 2,500 plus license applications that could not be filed with the FCC during the recent federal government shutdown. Intermittent outages across several FCC systems, including CORS, which is used for payment, may delay processing of new, upgraded, and renewal license applications, as well as individual and club filings. Some FCC search pages may display access denied or timeout. Please be patient and try again as the FCC works to resolve these issues. Candidates who still need an FCC registration number, or FRN, should continue to visit the Corps' website.
Share technical insights on your field day setups and emergency communications activities. QST invites submissions of technical manuscripts from licensed amateur radio operators for upcoming issues focused on ARRL Field Day and emergency communications operations. We're looking for educational, how-to pieces that help fellow hams improve their setups, strategies, and technical know-how. What we're looking for: innovative or proven techniques for emergency preparedness and response. Technical solutions for field day operations, power, antennas, logging, digital modes, etc. Integration of new technologies like SDR, mesh, networking, solar power, in-field scenarios. Examples of how the popularity of Parks on the Air portable activations has changed your approach to setting up field day and emergency communication stations. Examples of how portable antennas and LifePo batteries have replaced base station antennas and generators. Manuscripts should have a strong how-to component. Tell us what you did, but more importantly, tell us how you did it. Submission guidelines. Audience, licensed amateur radio operators. The length, 1,000 to 1,800 words. plus high-resolution images with caption and photo credit information, including the name and call sign of the photographer. Tone, educational and collaborative, share that works. Format, plain text or Word document. Deadline, January 31st, 2026. Submit to qst@arrl.org. Why contribute? Your article could be published in QST, ARRL's membership journal, which reaches thousands of fellow amateurs across the country and beyond. It's a great way to give back to the community and inspire others with your experience.
If you or your club are developing projects that advance amateur radio or digital communications, now's a great time to apply for Amateur Radio Digital Communications, or ARDC, grant funding, with the next application deadline on February 1st, 2026. The Foundation has been awarding grants since 2019, supporting a wide range of initiatives that strengthen and expand the amateur radio and digital communications communities. ARDC's priority areas for funding reflect the organization's broader vision and strategy for supporting experimentation, education, and open technology within the amateur radio and digital communications communities. They are especially interested in projects that align with these three areas. Research and development. Open hardware and software systems that enable learning and experimentation, such as software-defined radios, open codec technologies, and new modulation techniques. Space-based communications, projects that create or expand access to satellite communications for amateur radio and digital communications, engaging communities in wireless experimentation programs such as repurposed commercial satellites and space-based tools for learning. Open source education, scalable open educational materials and hands-on projects that make amateur radio and digital communications more accessible, especially for new learners and clubs. Proposals are welcome across the full range of projects that align with these areas and remain a priority in ARDC grant-making decisions. Learn more about these priority areas and ARDC at ardc.net.
Hackers are hijacking U.S. radio transmission equipment to broadcast bogus emergency messages and obscene language, the FCC has said this week. In a public notice, the FCC said a recent string of cyber intrusions against various radio broadcasters had occurred, resulting in the issuance of U.S. Emergency Systems Attention Signal. The signal is an attention-grabbing sound that's meant to precede official announcements related to tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, and such. The FCC said the hackers appeared to have compromised improperly secured equipment made by the Swiss network audio company Barrix and reconfigured it to receive attacker-controlled audio in lieu of station programming. The emergency said that the affected stations broadcast to the public an attacker-inserted audio stream that included an actual or simulated attention signal and EAS alert tones, as well as obscene language and other inappropriate material. The FCC notice cited reporting from the last few days about radio streams in Texas and Virginia being hijacked to broadcast bigoted or offensive material. The agency urged broadcasters to take basic security precautions, such as changing the default password and regularly installing updates. Barrix didn't immediately respond to an email seeking comment. However, in a 2016 statement issued in the wake of a similar spate of hijacking, the company said that Barrix will likely emphasize that its devices are secure for broadcast use when set up accordingly and protected with a strong password.
EvoHam.com recently launched as a resource for amateur radio operators interested in digital voice modes. The new site focuses on DMR, D-Star, Yaesu Fusion, P25, NXDN, M17, and FreeDV with how-to guides, reviews, and tutorials. Whether you're a beginner exploring your first DMR handheld or an experienced operator experimenting with M17 or FreeDV, EvoHam brings everything together in one place: guides, reviews, tutorials, tools, resources, and news. Example articles include M17 for Beginners, a step-by-step guide for new hams, and FreeDV for Beginners, get started with digital voice on HF.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's National Weather Service, or NWS, has announced the cancellation of Skywarn Recognition Day. The necessary time and resources required to plan a comprehensive national event for Skywarn are not available this year. Thus, the difficult decision was made to cancel this year's event. Established in 1999 by the National Weather Service and ARRL, Skywarn Recognition Day celebrates the critical contributions that Skywarn volunteers make in supporting the National Weather Service's mission to protect life and property. Amateur radio operators constitute a significant portion of these volunteers. The National Weather Service ARRL Skywarn Recognition Day National Committee extends its appreciation to all Skywarn volunteers for their dedication and service to their community and offers best wishes for a safe and happy holiday season.
The operator of a pirate radio station in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, has agreed to pay $7,200 to the United States Treasury as part of a consent decree with the FCC. According to a recent report that appeared on the Radio World website, the FCC said that the operator, Robert Bellinger, had been broadcasting on 93.1 megahertz FM without a license. The payment, which is part of his consent decree, was substantially reduced from the agency's original proposed forfeiture of $40,000, which it sought in 2024 in a notice of apparent liability. The Radio World report said that Bellinger responded to the notice at the time and told the FCC he was not able to pay that amount. An FCC review of his finances resulted in an alternative solution, a consent decree in which Bellinger admitted to his illegal broadcast and a commitment to make the voluntary contribution specified.
During the entire month of December, many young hams around the world will be active with YOTA, or Youth on the Air, as the suffix in their call sign. In the U.S., look for one-by-one special event calls and regular call signs. Many of these young hams are encouraging other youths to be active on the amateur radio bands. Some will give demonstrations at their schools, introducing ham radio to friends while making QSOs or enjoying a great pile-up. Licensed and unlicensed youth, with the help of a licensed operator, will be making QSOs. Everyone is reminded that this could be the first radio contact ever for some newcomers. Help fill their logbooks. Use this direct link to the DX cluster, already filtered, to spot active stations during December YOTA month. DYM Stations 2025, hosted by DXSummit.fi.
The Battleship Iowa Amateur Radio Association and the Iowa's Innovation, Engineering, and Technology team will activate the ship's original November Echo Papa Mike Navy call sign on December 6th and 7th, 2025. In addition, operators on the Battleship Alabama will activate their ship's original November Echo Mike Whiskey call sign on the same days. The activations will be in memory of the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, and all the radio amateurs and aficionados who answered the call, taking their skills into military and civilian war efforts. The Federal Communications Commission has issued a waiver to Section 97.111, Subpart A, to allow appropriately licensed amateur radio operators to work November Echo Papa Mike and November Echo Mike Whiskey for this limited event. Amateurs are reminded that they may not transmit on the military frequencies issued to November Echo Papa Mike or November Echo Mike Whiskey. Amateur radio operators must operate within the privileges of their licenses. Licensees of other countries not under FCC jurisdiction are advised to refer to the regulations imposed by their licensing agencies before calling November Echo Papa Mike or November Echo Mike Whiskey. For more information, frequencies, and the November Echo Papa Mike or November Echo Mike Whiskey QSL card, please follow the detailed instructions found at biara.org.
For the 16th consecutive year, the 3916 nets will be presenting the Santa Net on 3.916 megahertz. Girls and boys can talk to Santa Claus via amateur radio nightly at 7 p.m. Central, starting Friday, November 28th, the day after Thanksgiving, through Christmas Eve, December 24th. We enjoy helping young people and their families have a shared Christmas experience that they'll always remember, said Pete Thompson, KE5GGY. Christmas time is a very special time for our nets every year, and we're thrilled to introduce young people to the excitement of amateur radio. Youngsters can talk to Santa at the North Pole via strategically placed operators who relay the voice of Santa. Thompson said that the Santa Net is a team effort that involves a number of 3916 Net members. In our first year, we connected 10 kids to Santa on ham radio, and it's grown steadily ever since. This year, we're expecting over 1,000 children to participate. Prior to each night's Santa Net, pre-net check-ins can be made at www.cqsanta.com. Third-party rules and regulations apply. The Santa Nets are presented annually by the 3916 Nets, which includes the Rag Chew crew, the Tailgaters, and the Freewheelers. For more information on the 3916 Nets, go to www.3916nets.com. For more information on the Santa Net, email ke5ggy@gmail.com.
The Radio Society of Great Britain is looking for a proactive and knowledgeable volunteer to serve as its new accessibility champion. This important role will focus on ensuring that people with disabilities can fully participate and enjoy everything that amateur radio has to offer. Key responsibilities include engaging with the amateur radio community, serving as a point of contact, and signposting people to resources that can help them, as well as raising awareness of the challenges faced by individuals and sharing inspiring stories. If you have a strong understanding of accessibility issues, ideally with personal experience or professional expertise, and are passionate about inclusion within amateur radio, the Society would love to hear from you. If you are interested in finding out more, including having a chat about the role, first read the full role description, then contact RSGB Board Director Nathan Nuttall, 2M0OCC.
When space enthusiasts set up antennas in their back gardens, they usually expect to pick up signals from known weather satellites, or maybe track the International Space Station as it sweeps across the sky. What they don't expect is to stumble onto radio messages from a classified U.S. government fleet. But that's exactly what's happened, and the discovery has begun to cause a stir among the scientific community. Scott Tilley, a Canadian amateur known for rediscovering a NASA satellite once thought lost, was scanning frequencies recently when he noticed something strange, a radio signal coming from where there simply shouldn't have been one. A quiet patch of spectrum, normally reserved for Earth-to-satellite communication, was suddenly alive with traffic coming the other way, from orbit down to Earth. The signals trace back to Starshield, a covert branch of SpaceX's satellite empire, designed exclusively for U.S. governmental and military use. Over 170 satellites appear to be transmitting in this off-limits band. International rules are strict when it comes to satellite radio use. The International Telecommunications Union, a UN agency, assigns each frequency for a specific purpose. Starshield's activity doesn't match the permissions on record. Kevin Gifford of the University of Colorado noted that so far no harmful interference has been publicly recorded, but if such a large constellation keeps transmitting this way, the risk will grow. Thousands of devices in orbit are already jostling for clean signal space. Small, numerous, and fast to replace, these satellites can relay encrypted tactical data, support surveillance of Earth, and withstand attacks by sheer redundancy. A former U.S. Air Force General, Terrence O'Shaughnessy, now oversees the program, underlining how the line between Silicon Valley and the Pentagon has all but disappeared. At this moment, over 60% of all active satellites belong to SpaceX. That number is growing every month. Some projections estimate that by 2050, over 100,000 SpaceX satellites could be orbiting the Earth. That presents three huge challenges. First, orbital congestion presents more risk of collision. Second, spectrum conflict, and fewer clean frequencies for science and civilian use.
The FCC voted to delete about 21 rules and requirements that officials say no longer serve the public interest. The action is part of the agency's Delete docket, which seeks public input on identifying FCC rules for the purpose of alleviating unnecessary regulatory burdens. Thursday's vote deletes rule provisions and rule parts that are unnecessary because they have been sunset by operation of law or govern an expired event. This includes the suggested elimination of a rule referencing a board that has not existed in more than a decade, or another rule that was rendered moot in 2012 when FirstNet was established. In addition, the Commission proposes deletions of language governing compliance deadlines which have long since passed. The Commission says deleting these rules has no impact on the FCC's continued commitment to strengthen public safety. Chairman Brendan Carr and Commissioner Olivia Trusty voted for the action. Carr called it another step forward in the FCC's ongoing effort to eliminate unnecessary regulations. Commissioner Ana Gomez voted for some portions and dissented from the provisions that she said were not obsolete nor expired.
This story, although primarily for our Radio Society of Great Britain members listening, contains an idea almost every ham radio club should look at emulating. Whether you have only recently soldered your first wire in a kit build, or you have experience in designing an advanced software or systems engineering project, the RSGB construction competition is for you. As part of the RSGB strategic growth priority, it wants to inspire people from different communities to find out more about amateur radio. That is why the Society has introduced a new category this year called Reimagination. If you think your project could be interesting to the maker community, or if you have an idea that could encourage people from groups such as Men's Sheds to try amateur radio, this is the category for you. If it is radio-related but motivates non-radio amateurs to find out more, the RSGB welcomes your entry. There are 6 other categories, which means there is literally something for everybody. You must be an RSGB member to enter, but you can live anywhere in the world, as entries will be judged online to allow you to participate and demonstrate your creativity remotely. The deadline for entries is March 1st, 2026.
The deadline to apply for an ARRL scholarship to be given in 2026 is fast approaching. Applicants will have until noon on December 30th to apply. The ARRL Foundation makes more than 150 scholarships available in the amounts ranging from $500 to $25,000. Recipients must be active FCC licensed young radio operators. Different scholarships have different criteria, however, and some awards, such as the Amateur Radio Digital Communication Scholarship, are available to licensed active hams outside of the United States. There are also 3 1010 scholarships available to all amateur radio operators who are not necessarily United States citizens, residents, nor holders of a United States license. For descriptions of all the scholarships and an online application form, visit the ARRL website and search scholarships.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. And happy Thanksgiving from my shack to yours. I hope that this holiday brings you lots of turkey, lots of friends, and lots of DX. And speaking of lots of DX, we have a ton. This weekend, November 29th and 30th, is the CQ Worldwide DX-CW contest. Most of the information that I must share is due to operators traveling to remote places and operating in the specific contest. I've mentioned before that a good time to get new ones is to fill band slots is the week before and the week after the contest. Unless otherwise noted, all of these stations will be active in the contest. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just do what a number of other listeners and viewers have done and drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. I'll take care of it. Well, let's start with the Bahamas, Charlie 6 Alpha. Brian, November Delta 3 Fox, will be returning to the Bahamas where he will operate as Charlie 6 Alpha Quebec during the contest. His QSL manager is Pedro, EA5 Golf Lima. From Montserrat, VP2 Mike, we find that Juan, Alpha Charlie 6 Zulu Mike, has announced more details of his upcoming Victor Papa 2 Mike Alpha activity from Montserrat. The team should be QRV now until December 5th. During the contest, they will be in a multi-single, low-power category. Outside the contest, they will focus on the high bands and the WARC 79 bands. They will have 2 stations on the air. Activity will be on 160 through 6 meters. Anyone who needs a SCAD can email Alpha Charlie 6 Zulu Mike. Outside the contest, they plan to use Club Log's live stream, and you can QSL VP2 Mike Alpha via LOTW, OQRS, and Alpha Charlie 6 Zulu Mike. From Antigua and Barbuda, which is Victor 2, we have Bud, Alpha 3 Bravo, who is absolutely one of the best CW contesters I've ever heard. Bud is QRV from Antigua is Victor 26 Kilo until December 1st. His activity includes a single operator, all band, and low power entry in the contest with a focus on CW during his trip. QSLs are available via LOTW, the Bureau, direct to his home call, or OQRS via Club Log. Now we look at Victor 4, St. Kitts and Nevis. Andy, November 2 November Tango, will be single op all band high power as usual at Victor 47 Tango. He'll be QRV as Victor 42 November Tango until December 2nd, and you can QSL him via Whiskey 2 Romeo Quebec. From the Azores, Charlie Uniform, we find Oliver, Whiskey 6 November Victor. He is in the Azores right now preparing for the contest. Charlie Radio 2 Mike will be a modest multi-2 operator station run by Kilo Zero Alpha Victor and Whiskey 6 November Victor, with assistance from Charlie Uniform 2 Charlie Echo and Charlie Uniform 2 DX. San Miguel Island is where they'll be located, and QSLs are available only via LOTW, so watch for the Azores. We have a single band effort from the Aland Islands, OH0. Pekka, OH2 Tango Alpha, plans to operate OH0 Zulu as a single band 15-meter effort. Good luck to Pekka, and if you need him on 15, he's a solid operator. Dimitri, RA3 Charlie Oscar, is headed back to Suriname, Papa Zulu, where he will be QRV as Papa Zulu 5DX as a single op, all-band, low-power effort, and you can QSL him via LOTW or Uniform Alpha 2 Fox Mike. Now we have a group of Chinese operators. BY is the prefix for China. Boston Alpha 7 November Quebec, Boston Alpha 7 November Oscar, and Boston Alpha 4 Radio Fox are teaming up for a multi-single as Boston 0 Alpha from CQ Zone 23, and you can QSL that operation via LOTW. And I chased Zone 23 for a long time, so I'll be looking for those guys just to make sure I got it. From Panama, we find that OK2WX will be QRV as Hotel Papa 3 stroke OK2WX during both the CQ Worldwide contest and the ARRL 160-meter contest. He and HP3 stroke OK2YL will be there from November 26th to December 10th. Activity will be holiday style on CW and single sideband with an emphasis on the low bands. And you can QSL the Panama expedition via Italy 8 Kilo Hotel Charlie. So we have an entry from Kosovo, Zulu 6. Gabe, Hotel Bravo 9 Tango Sierra Whiskey, is currently in Kosovo and operating as Zulu 68 Boston Gardens until December 10th. He will be active on CW only, transmitting from Slatina Air Base near Pristina Airport using 100 watts and a ground plane vertical antenna. His activity will be during his free time due to work duties, and conditions may be noisy. He plans to participate in the contest as much as possible. So that's from Kosovo. Jamie, M0 Sugar Delta Victor, will be QRV as J38W from Grenada until December 2nd. He'll be on single sideband, CW, FT8, and FT4 on all bands. And you can QSL Jamie his J38 Whiskey operation via M0 OXO and LOTW. From Guyana, 8 Radio, we have Haight, Delta Juliet 9 Radio, who's planning to operate in the contest as 8 Radio 1 stroke Alpha Golf 6 Uniform Tango, running low power assisted category. So give that a listen. From Vietnam, ex-Victor, we have Alex, KU1 Charlie Whiskey, planning to operate in this year's contest as 3 Whiskey 9 Alpha as a single op, all band effort. He'll mostly be on 40 through 10 meters, but will try 80 meters for other Asian stations. He does not have an antenna for 160, so don't even query him about that. And you can QSL Alex via Kilo Uniform 1 Charlie Whiskey and LOTW. From Eastern Malaysia, which is 9 Mike 6 or 9 Mike 8, we have Sadie, JE1 Juliet Kilo Lima, announcing that he'll take part in the contest as 9 Mike 6 November Alpha in the single op all band high power category. and you can QSL that via LOTW and club log OQRS. And pay attention to the grain line for all of these Asian stations, because first thing in the morning and right at dawn, at dusk, there'll be surely some activity. Vlad and Paula, OK2 Whiskey X-Ray and OK2YL, are QRV until December 10th from Panama, which is HP, using HP3 OK2WX and HP3 OK2YL with their IC7610 and IC73 transceivers. Their antennas will cover 160 through 6 meters CW, sideband, and digital. QSL via IK8HC or LOTW. They will be in the CQ Worldwide CW and ARL contest. From Armenia, Echo Kilo, we have David, OK1 DTP, who will be on the contest in a single op, all band, low power category using the Echo Kilo 8 Alpha call sign. Another option is that he may go single band 40 with just the wire antennas that he has. If you work David, you can QSL via Echo Kilo 6 Sugar. From Martinique, we have, which is FM, we have Uniform Tango 5 Uniform Golf Radio, who will be in the contest as a single op, all band, high power entry as Tango Oscar 7 Alpha. His operation should run until December 4th. From Easter Island, we have this. The 3 Golf Zero Yankee Romeo DXpedition team will be QRV until December 3rd, including the contest. CW is coming up. The contest weekend call is Charlie Echo Zero Yankee. They plan to have as many as 5 stations with a strong focus on the low bands. So if you need Easter Island on 4080 or 160, this could be the weekend to do it. And finally, from the contest standpoint, we have Victor 8, which is Brunei. Hajmi, Juliet Oscar 1, Romeo Uniform Romeo, will once again be at the Victor 85 Romeo Hotel Station for the contest. This will be a single op, all band, high power effort from CQ Zone 28. You can QSL the Victor 85 RH via LOTW. So here's a series of updates on other activities that will be active at the same time. I just didn't want to leave these out. Our first update is on the Alpha 52 AA Bhutan DXpedition. Bhutan is not common, so if you get a chance to work Alpha 52 Alpha, you should do it. AB1 Fox is preparing for his Alpha 52 Alpha operation from Bhutan and should be QRV now until December 5th. He had received his licenses and visa, paid the sustainable development fee, and packed his bags, although they are slightly over the weight limit. He said, quote, "The rotatable dipole was installed a little before dark here today in Thimphu, Bhutan. The wire dipole has also been set up, but these tasks, even with help, have worn me out and the bands look empty too. So the first CQs will most likely go out tomorrow morning and not today," and this was on Wednesday. I will post updates on my Facebook page, 7-3 and thanks for all dia, Alpha 52 Alpha. Derek, Sugar Papa 9 Delta Lima Mike, will be traveling to Baku, Azerbaijan, which is 4 kilo, and is QRV on the HF bands using sideband until the end of the month, November 30th. So if you hear Azerbaijan soon, you need to work them. He will be using the call sign 4 Juliet / Sugar Papa 9 Delta Lima Mike. And I have an update on Antarctica, which is Kilo Charlie 4. Frank, Fox 8 Delta Victor Delta, reports that the 2025-2026 season at Neumayer Station III in Antarctica has begun. The new ham operator, Delta Lima 9 Lima Uniform, arrived on November 18th with the wintering team and will be active as Delta Papa 0 Golf Victor Nancy until December 2026, with QSLs available via Club Log OQRS. Felix, Delta Lima 5 X-Ray Lima, is scheduled to return from early January to mid-February 2026, operating as Delta Papa 1 Papa Oscar Lima, with his QSLs going via Delta Lima 1 Zulu Bravo Oscar. So after the first of the year, you'll have 2 chances to get Antarctica in the log. We have an update on Sierra Leone, which is 9 Lima. Stephen, Golf 7 BUX, arrived in Freetown, Sierra Leone on November 24th and is QRV until December 10th. He will be operating as 9 Lima 1 Baker Tango uniform with an IC 7300 and a G5 RV. He is experiencing significant QRM on the low bands and occasional electrical blackouts. He hopes to install a solar power system during his trip and will operate holiday style when he has time, and QSL this operation to Golf 7 Baker X-Ray uniform. And we have a group operating from Cambodia, which is X-ray uniform, until December 3rd. The Russian Robinson Club XU-7 Radio Charlie IOTA de-expedition team plans an operation until December 3rd from IOTA AS-133, which is Ko-Ta Kiev. Their low-band antennas arrived in the United Arab Emirates. Alexander, Alpha 65 Whiskey, will be taking them as checked baggage. Several beverage receiving antennas are also planned. It remains to be seen if the site will work out for those. I have an update from Mauritius, which is 3 Baker 8 Mike. Quote, "We have no exciting cyclone threat as yet this year, so we are suffering boringly beautiful and peaceful weather. No interference from snakes, lions, not even mosquitoes. We have a smaller team this year and we'll do multi-2. Our verticals for 160, 80, 40, and a new 40, 20, 15, 10 antenna are in place. We are trying a new main 40-meter configuration, a 2-element parasitic vertical array. The model did not agree with the measurements in practice. Changing the diameter of the Earth, the distance from the sun, and the salinity of the ocean sorted that out. I don't know how they did that, but well done. On reflection, it would have been easier to change the guy trying to do the modeling. We start with building our VDAs and Omnis for 2015 and 10 today, and this would have been Tuesday. Our whole antenna farm is wires on spider beam poles by the oceans. It might well be that some bold soul will try FT8 on the low bands tonight, but no promise. The team might also share a small bottle of Green Island rum while solving the current problems in the world. And that was from Olaf, Golf Zero Charlie Kilo Victor, 7 threes, and have fun in CQ Worldwide. I love updates like that. Thank you, Olaf. Finally, we have an update on Palau. Tango 88 Alpha Radio, quote, "We have about 3,600 Qs in the log so far. Based on our location and propagation conditions, contacts with Europe and North America are hard to come by. We only have a few hours of daylight to North America. We are delayed in erecting our 160 antenna, and there is no physical space for it. The staff here are trimming trees to make room for the 160 antenna, so we'll have to see. We're in a mostly jungle-like environment with little open space, and the available space is used by the facilities for parking and other activities. We also have a noise problem at night that affects the low bands. This is probably due to LED lighting, but we're not sure. Most bands have S7 or greater noise at night, which dissipates after sunrise. We found backing off the RF gain on the K3 can help, and WSJTX does an amazing job of pulling out stations on the noisy bands. I'll send more information as available, 73 AL K7AR. And of course, when he sends it, you'll hear it here. I know that was a lot, but boy, there's a lot going on this weekend. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-ups. Have a great DX week.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. The other day I was stuck in traffic behind a vehicle proudly proclaiming that it was electric. I'd seen the model before, just never connected it with being available as an EV. I wondered how many other cars on the road turned out to have added an electric option to their lineup, and how that evolution had just quietly, inexorably occurred. It started me thinking about the nature of the driving experience and what it would be like for someone who has never seen a petrol or other fossil fuel burning vehicle, and what driver education might do to incorporate that. In my teens, I first sat on a hotted-up moped belonging to a friend. I was old enough to be legal whilst he wasn't, so I got to ride his bike to school with him on the back. Win-win for both. Later on, I learned to drive a car with a manual gearbox, and as interest took me, I learned to drive a double-clutch gearbox and got my heavy, rigid truck license. I also learned to fly a plane, but that's beside the point. Stuck in rush-hour traffic, such as it is in Perth, it made me think about amateur radio licensing and education. Specifically, how do we incorporate change? When I was first licensed, my education included consideration for analog television interference, including pictures of different screen patterns, their causes and remedies. 3 years after I got licensed, almost to the day, the last analog television transmitter in Australia was switched off on 10 December 2013, 57 years after the first transmission started. While I retain little, if any, of the now, let's call it, esoteric information associated with that, it made me consider a wider picture in relation to the process of amateur radio education. New amateurs today are unlikely to be asked about analog television interference, let alone be subjected to questions in their exam. Fair enough, information changes, evolves, becomes superseded or expires. And as a side effect, I have some brain cells dedicated to analog television. PAL, 625 lines total, 576 visible, horizontal and vertical synchronization, white noise, you get the idea. As an aside, 78 on a turntable indicates a speed reserved for shellac records until the 1950s. Seeing that we're dropping arcane knowledge. $EA means NOP on a 6502, in case you're wondering. Although I don't have a specific list of what is currently being taught, more on that in a moment, I dare say that newly minted amateurs have a curriculum that has evolved with technology and legal requirements over the past 15 years. A tangible example is the fact that the foundation class in Australia is now permitted to use digital modes, something that changed after I was licensed, when on 21 September 2019 the regulator amended the Amateur License Conditions Determination, known locally as the LCD, with immediate effect, the point being that over time things change and education changes with it. This is all as expected. Here's my question. What about the rest of the community? What happens to someone who has been licensed for a decade, a generation, or more? Are they expected to gain these skills by osmosis or self-education? Should this process be dictated by the regulator, or should this be a community effort to bring everyone into the same decade? Should we revise how we educate our amateurs and make the education skill set technology agnostic? Should we be less prescriptive with the license, or should it achieve something else? One example in this space is an initiative called the Ham Challenge, which you can discover at hamchallenge.org. In case it sounds vaguely familiar, I've talked about this before. It's a list of 52 activities that you can take on to broaden your horizons and explore different aspects of our hobby. In its first year, I'm looking forward to seeing how it evolves. Is this the kind of self-training that we might encourage, or is there another way to achieve this? Is this something that occurs elsewhere in society, and if so, how has that been addressed? I know, for example, in ICT there are endless certification courses, which I have to confess are, in my professional opinion, absolutely counterproductive, serving only to entrench vendor lock-in, not something that I think benefits the amateur community. I mentioned curriculum a moment ago. Another approach is to attend a licensing course and participate as part of your own self-education. Of course, this will require cooperation from the educators, and we'd need to come up with some idea of how this might be useful. Is this something that benefits from attendance every 5 years, every decade, more, less? As a bonus side effect, it will introduce new amateurs to old ones, and vice versa, perhaps facilitating a new resurgence of elmering or mentorship that previously has been the hallmark of our community. Over the decade and a half or so that I've been licensed and writing weekly articles about the hobby and our community, I've made a conscious effort to keep up to date, to learn new skills, to share what I've learnt, to actively explore what I need to learn more about, and to share that journey with you. I realise that this is not a universal experience. For some, their amateur license sits in a drawer gathering dust together with their first aid certificate and their first runner-up prize for something that for a minute and a half caught their attention years ago. For most of us, the reality lies somewhere in between. For many, the amateur experience is one of playing on air and getting delight from the doing and participating. There are those who go out and become teachers, those who sit on boards, those who run clubs, and those who get on the local repeater once a week. It takes all of us to make this community, and my thoughts are not intended to stop that enjoyment and experience. I'm trying to discover how we build a resilient community, one that is sustainable in a world of continuous and rapid change. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
Welcome to the 47th segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio. Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Our thanks go out to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for granting us permission to use his website as we prepare these segments. Now, ride along with us as we present this next chapter of Ham Radio History. Scooped. This is part 2 of this segment. After a year's worth of records and new international contacts, the January 1924 QST cover drawing by Clyde Darr, 8ZZ, depicted a vision of the near future. 1930, no help needed from Mr. Wells, a U.S. ham holding a fistful of QSL cards and many more hanging on the wall from various countries, locates a new contact on a globe into which he's sticking map pins. There are many already present on what appears to be the European continent. Although Darr saw his vision become reality much sooner than he had forecast, he became a silent key 1 month short of that new decade's arrival after having drawn 69 QST covers. In the last month of his life, he received hundreds of messages in a message party held in his honor. As the weather turned cool, hot news is breaking every day. Amateur records are being smashed to smithereens every time we turn around, and it's a wild job to keep up with progress and get the stuff chronicled in the mag, wrote Warner. November alone brought several achievements. The first two-way transatlantic amateur contact, which also was the first 100-meter transatlantic contact by any radio service. The record on 100 meters, a new all-time distance record wherein WNP worked U6CEU in Hawaii, who was using 3 5-watt tubes in his transmitter. New relaying records in time and distance, the first contacts between Alaskan stations and the continental U.S., and 2 Australian stations were heard in California. The 4th transatlantic tests had not yet officially reached their 11 January date for two-way contacts on 200 meters. As Warner noted, the short waves have scooped the tests, but he still expected many more on 200 meters once they began. The tests ran as scheduled despite being scooped, and the winners were announced in March 1924. The top prize went to R.B. Bourne, U1A&A, Chatham, Massachusetts, known previously for his early work with WNP for the greatest number of station miles, 390,460, having logged 12 British stations, 9 French and 1 Dutch. In all, 20 British, 14 French, and 3 Dutch stations were copied. The UK's W.W. Burnham now owed Kenneth Warner the clock they had wagered. It's unclear what happened to the green suspenders idea. About 1,200 interfering American stations were copied during the test and reported to the traffic manager, officially disqualifying them from winning prizes. Comparatively unnoticed, the Trans-Pacific tests ran in late October, during which 150 to 200 American and Canadian amateurs were received in Australia. Poor conditions prevailed with strong strays and harmonic interference. 6KA was the strongest station making it through from the U.S. Perhaps it was because the work with WNP was primarily focused on receiving messages from the Macmillan expedition as opposed to transmitting to them, or maybe it was that no one yet fully understood the advantages of shorter wavelengths. It's also possible that the pervasive belief that longer aerials were required made hams discount the relevance of the recent tests because they knew WNP had limited space. Whatever the reason was, no one told Don Mix about the recent accomplishments on short waves. As spring of 1924 approached, and the Bowen crew began to see some daylight around noon, signal strength had fallen off even more rapidly. The window of opportunity for hams in North America to work or even hear the expedition would now grow increasingly narrow as the expedition anticipated their return voyage. WNP was in two-way contact with home only sporadically through February and March, without having a single contact with 9BP, previously their most reliable link. Just enough communication got through to home in early April to convey that all was well with the expedition. The Bowen was now in constant daylight. As conditions continued to worsen, no further contacts were made, and even the signals from the powerful commercial stations were difficult to copy at WNP. Facing terrible radio conditions, and with the fuel supply dwindling, Mix recommended to Macmillan that he suspend the regular radio watch, and from that point operated much less frequently until they began the return trip in August. Frustratingly, the recent achievements on the short waves were still completely unknown to Mix. Though it now seemed like a logical suggestion, no one had gotten through to ask him to move to shorter wavelengths. specifically 100 meters, where it might have been easier to make contact even during the nearly 24-hour daylight. As expected, the ice began to break in June, forcing them to abandon the longer aerials strung between the ship and the ice. The expedition left for home on 1 August. As they navigated south along the Greenland coast, conditions began to improve, and on 26 August they made contact with U-9CDV in East Grand Forks, Minnesota. Communication was mostly continuous from that point on, making contact with amateurs all along the way home, including Milton Mix, Don's brother, operating from U-1TS, Don's home station. On 20 September 1924, they arrived back at Wiscasset, Maine, having traveled more than 2,000 miles and spent 320 days frozen in the Arctic winter ice. The crew was welcomed home by a gathering of several thousand people, filling the small town in the village green. Maxim was one of the speakers in a ceremony at the Congregational Church. Though never tuned to higher frequencies, WNP Zenith radio equipment had performed beyond expectations. Not a single tube or battery had needed replacement during the entire 15-month expedition. After returning, Mix reported that while he had copied scraps here and there about the activity on shorter wavelengths, he had no idea they had been so successful. He concluded that if he had been able to get down to 100 meters or so, the communications would have been much more reliable even during daylight. Included in this material are quotes from the following: Clyde Eldon Darr, 1879-1929, QST, February 1930, page 25. Kenneth B. Warner, Transatlantic Tests Report, QST, March 1924, page 32. Kenneth B. Warner, Transatlantic Tests Report, QST, February 1924, page 40. F. H. Schnell, Bowden Continues but Communication Poor, QST, May 1924, page 30. F. H. Schnell, 9ZT and 6GCS Work WNP, QST, July 1924, page 13. F. H. Schnell, WNP, Nearing Home, QST, October 1924, page 19. The Bowden Returns, QST, November 1924, page 16. Donald H. Mix, My Radio Experience in the Far North, QST, November 1924, page 17. With appreciation to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, in the preparation of this segment, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. AMSAT ambassadors provide presentations, demonstrate communicating through amateur satellites, and host information tables at club meetings, hamfest, conventions, maker fairs, and other events. AMSAT ambassador Clint Bradford, K6LCS, offers a 75-minute live Zoom presentation on working the easy satellites with gear most hams already own. And if you think one would be appropriate for your club or event, you can reach out to Clint by emailing him at clint@mail.net. Clint has never given the same show twice. Each of his more than 180 presentations has been customized and tailored to his audience. Thanks to Clint, more and more hams are learning about satellite operations when there would be no local ham to present satellite operations to them. If you are a satellite operator and would like to become an AMSAT ambassador, visit amsat.org/ambassador. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for this week's look at the solar space weather and the terrestrial propagation forecast. Solar flare activity has been at low levels this week, with only C-class flares observed. Region 4291 remains the most complex region on the disk, but has been relatively quiet. Region 4290 was also responsible for a few flares while experiencing overall decay. Region 4292 exhibited evolution as it gained intermediate spots with rudimentary penumbra and developed asymmetric penumbra around its trailing spots. there were no Earth-directed coronal mass ejections in available coronagraph imagery. Flare probabilities remain low, with a 15% chance for minor to moderate flares and a 1% chance for X-class or strong flares, but may slightly increase in the next 24 hours given the current development observed in region 4292. Solar wind parameters were enhanced throughout the period due to the arrival of a co-rotating interacting region and its associated coronal hole high-speed stream. Solar wind parameters will remain enhanced through November 27th due to the continued influence of the coronal hole high-speed stream. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read A Quick Guide to HF Propagation Using Solar Indices, and check out the propagation page of Carl Luetzelswab K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the VOCAP Online for Ham Radio website.
Just ahead in Radio Sport, November 27th, it's the RSGB 80-meter Autumn Series. That's CW. November 29th and 30th, it's the CQ Worldwide DX Contest. That's also CW. December 2nd, the ARS Spartan Sprint, CW. December 4th, the QRP ARCI Top Band Sprint. That's CW. December 4th and 5th, the Walk for the Bacon QRP Contest, CW as well. December 4th, it's the NRAU 10-meter Activity Contest, CW Phone and Digital. Also on December 4th, the SKCC Sprint Europe, CW. December 5th, the NCCC FT4 Sprint Digital. And also on December 5th, it's the weekly RTTY test, that's digital. And December 5th through the 7th, the ARRL 160-meter contest, that is CW. And remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming Section State and Division Conventions, December 12th and the 13th, the Tampa Bay Hamfest hosting the ARRL West Central Florida Section Convention. That's in Plant City, Florida. January 10th, Ham Radio University hosting the ARRL New York City Long Island Section Convention. That's in Brookville, New York. January 16th and 17th, the Southwest Florida Regional Hamfest hosting the ARRL Southern Florida Section Convention in Fort Myers, Florida. January 30th and the 31st, Jackson MS Capital City Hamfest hosting the ARRL Mississippi State Convention in Jackson, Mississippi. And looking ahead on February 7th, the Hendricks County Hamfest hosting the ARRL Indiana Section Convention. That's in Danville, Indiana. And on February 13th to the 15th, the Orlando Hamcation hosting the ARRL Southeastern Division Convention in Orlando, Florida. And remember to search the ARRL Hamfest and Convention database to find events in your area.
Alarm is growing among federal workers at NASA's iconic Goddard Space Flight Center's main campus in Greenbelt, Maryland, the nerve center for groundbreaking missions like the Hubble and James Webb Space Telescopes, as more than a dozen buildings on the campus are being emptied and padlocked during the federal shutdown, with very little notice to employees, said four sources who spoke to CNN on the condition of anonymity for fear of retribution. NASA's leadership has pushed back against those concerns. In one instance, furloughed employees were given just days to temporarily return to work and help empty entire buildings of highly specialized equipment, according to sources and internal emails obtained by CNN. In the communications, NASA managers wrote that equipment not moved in time, including one-of-a-kind hardware, could be thrown away or donated. In a statement, NASA spokesperson said the building closures are part of a strategic consolidation plan mapped out by Goddard leaders that should not impact ongoing projects. One document reviewed by CNN, which was compiled by more than a dozen Goddard workers concerned about the steps taken at the campus, states that 13 buildings are being shuttered, including about 100 laboratories. The roughly 1,270-acre campus includes more than 30 large buildings and dozens of smaller structures. The changes described by sources have the space agency's engineers concerned they could permanently lose access to equipment and facilities that are crucial to keeping current and future projects on track.
Recent months have seen space fans revel in a wealth of spectacular astrophotography depicting the evolution of Comet Lemon's glowing coma and twisting tail as it journeyed through a northern hemisphere night sky swarming with satellites. While many photographers opted to post sanitized views of Comet Lemon, Others intentionally compiled their images to reveal the incredible number of satellites that cross the night sky over the course of multiple exposures. Photographically, if someone is attempting to take a single image of a target and needs the image to be clean, free of man-made objects, well, that image is nearly impossible to obtain, astrophotographer Dan Bartlett told Space.com in an email. Every single subframe I take, prior to stacking, now contains at least one and usually more than one satellite streak. There are currently about 13,000 operational satellites orbiting Earth, of which about 8,900 are SpaceX Starlink craft. This number is set to exponentially increase, with SpaceX alone aiming to orbit up to 42,000 of its internet-beaming spacecraft, while competing companies aim to add thousands more satellites to their own mega-constellations. Astrophotographers combat satellite streaks by capturing a multitude of short exposures over the course of a single session. The images are then combined and subjected to an algorithm that determines a median value for each pixel before rejecting outlier pixels with values that exceed set parameters.
Several well-known radio amateurs are among recipients of this year's honors from the Radio Club of America, or RCA, an organization of both professionals and amateurs that's been promoting advancements in wireless communication for more than 100 years. The awards were announced in the fall of 2025 issue of RCA Proceedings magazine. Among the amateurs recognized this year by RCA are noted contester, former RCA president, and DX Engineering CEO Tim Duffy, K3LR, the recipient of the Edgar F. Johnson Pioneer Citation for noteworthy contributions to RCA. Chester B. Scholl, Jr., K3LA, receiving the Special Services Award for significant work to promote RCA's goals. Julio Ripoll, WD4R, longtime amateur radio coordinator at the National Hurricane Center, recognized for his service at WX4NHC with the Barry Goldwater Amateur Radio Award. And Dr. Christina Collins, KD8OXT, this year's recipient of the Carol Perry WB2MGP Young Professionals Award. Collins is the Chief Operations Scientist for the AMSAT Personal Space Weather Station Network. She also voices announcements heard each hour on WWV and WWVH as part of the WWV Scientific Modulation Working Group. In addition, several hams nominated as LCA Fellows, including AT&T Executive Brian Daly, WB7OML, Ham SCI founder and coordinator Dr. Nathaniel Frizzell, W2NAF, radio historian Felicia Kreutzer, KA2GXL, public safety communicator and former ARRL Western Washington Section Manager Monty Simpson, W7FF, and Angel Vasquez, WP3R, head of telescope operations for the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico. The awards will be presented at RCA's annual Technical Symposium and Awards Banquet on November 22nd in Washington, D.C.
The Federal Communications Commission today voted on next steps to help accelerate the transition from aging copper lines to modern network infrastructure. Through this notice of proposed rulemaking, the Commission will examine the interconnection requirements imposed on legacy networks and seek comment on ways the Commission can facilitate a successful transition to all IP interconnection for voice services while enhancing public safety, consumer protection, and competition. The Commission has acted quickly this year to hasten the transition to next-generation communications networks by cutting red tape and easing unnecessary regulatory burdens through its Build America agenda. These actions have worked to ensure that providers roll out upgraded high-speed networks to more Americans on a faster timeline, rather than requiring providers to keep pouring resources into maintaining decades-old and increasingly expensive copper line networks. Although only a small fraction of consumers today subscribe to legacy standalone copper-based voice service, the Commission's interconnection requirements force incumbent local exchange carriers to maintain costly, outdated infrastructure. Despite increasingly widespread adoption of IP technology by consumers and businesses, the current interconnection regulatory framework for local voice service has delayed the promise of ubiquitous next-generation networks. Today's action builds on previous Commission efforts to expedite this transition by proposing to eliminate the burdensome agency interconnection regulations that have flowed from Section 251 of the Communications Act of 1934 as amended. In addition, the Commission seeks comment on whether eliminating the incumbent LEC-specific interconnection regulatory framework may affect other statutory frameworks or Commission rules, and whether the Commission should revisit any other provisions or rules that are rendered redundant by the elimination of the incumbent LEC-specific interconnection obligations in Section 251.
In the United States, the National Transportation Safety Board is investigating the mid-air collision in late October between a United States flight and a lightweight weather balloon over Moab, Utah, that left the pilot injured and prompted an emergency landing in Salt Lake City. According to a report on the KOMO TV news website, the Boeing 737 was flying at 36,002 feet when it crossed paths with a high-altitude balloon from Windborne Systems of Palo Alto, California. News reports said that the lightweight global-sounding balloon was launched a day earlier from Spokane, Washington. Global-sounding balloons use radiosondes to transmit atmospheric conditions and other data gathered during their flights. A statement on the Windborne Company website said that the incident was the only mid-air impact in the company's record of more than 4,000 launches. Media reports said that the captain's right arm suffered minor cuts, and some of the flight crew members were hit by glass from the first officer's shattered windshield. No cabin pressure was lost, and the plane was landed safely without further incident.
The Federal Communications Commission, by a 3-0 vote, opened a notice of proposed rulemaking to advance Congress's mandate to clear a minimum of 100 megahertz of upper C-band spectrum no later than July 2027 for auction and eventual use for 5G and 6G wireless service. The vote came 4 months after Congress passed and President Donald Trump signed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, restoring the Communications Authority to conduct spectrum auctions, and directed the FCC to free up spectrum in the 3.7 to 4.2 gigahertz band for competitive bidding for terrestrial wireless flexible use. The NPRM seeks comment on clearing between 180 megahertz from 3.98 gigahertz to 4.16 gigahertz and an additional 100 megahertz that Congress mandated between the 3.98 gigahertz and 4.08 gigahertz band. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act reauthorized the FCC to grant licensees through competitive bidding until September 2034. It set up a path to eventually repurpose 800 megahertz and set at least 500 megahertz for full-power commercial licensed use cases. Notice of proposed rulemaking seeks comment on how to accommodate incumbent satellite users and other services presently in the upper C-band. It also explores ways to promote coexistence with adjacent band radio altimeters, along with a range of related technical issues. The notice reflects input and coordination from the FCC's federal partners, including the FAA and the NTIA.
Having a disability of any kind should not keep an amateur radio operator or would-be amateur off the air. Recognizing this, the Radio Society of Great Britain is seeking someone to fill a new volunteer role as accessibility champion. The best candidate will raise public awareness of challenges for radio operators with disabilities while connecting those amateurs with community groups, assistive technologies, and other resources. The RSGB's move comes just a few weeks after the International Amateur Radio Union Region 1 announced an upcoming activity by its program for disabled radio amateurs. Organizers have declared a region-wide campaign on December 3rd in connection with the United Nations International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Hams have been encouraged to host a special event station, an open house, or a relevant educational forum. Meanwhile, the RSGB is interested in hearing from candidates to fill this post. A description of the role can be found on the Society's website, rsgb.org. The contact person is Board Director Nathan Newtall, 2M0OCC.
The European Space Agency, ESA, now estimates that over 140 million pieces of space debris, each larger than 1 millimeter, are traveling in Earth's orbit at an average velocity of 7 or 8 kilometers per second. As the number of defunct and fragmented human-made objects in space rapidly increases, so do the hazards they present. This number has grown. The Tiangong Space Station core module, Tianhe, launched in 2021, was impacted by a micrometeoroid and orbital debris event within just 2 years. The impact damaged solar panels, causing a partial loss of power, necessitating 2 spacewalks for repairs and the installation of external debris protection devices. The 25-year-old International Space Station has performed more than 30 in-orbit maneuvers to avoid satellites and trackable space debris. Micrometeoroid and orbital debris damage over the years to the ISS has impacted both the Russian Progress and Soyuz vehicles, Canadarm2, and one of the 7 windows of the cupola. When the Ressur's P-1 satellite broke apart in 2024, creating more than 100 pieces of trackable debris, the ISS crew took emergency shelter in their return vehicles for over an hour.
After 88 years on the air, Spain's Radio Nacional de España will stop broadcasting its Rene and Radio Cinco networks on medium-wave AM radio as the country's public broadcaster seeks to expand its digital radio DAB+ footprint. Radio Televisión Española, or RTVE, the parent to Rene, formally announced the end of Rene AM broadcasts on November 18th. The AM broadcasts will end before December 31st, and listeners will be informed through a special campaign. Rene and Radio Cinco operate on approximately 32 different AM frequencies across Spain, according to the 2025 World Radio TV Handbook. The following announcement started airing on Rene on November 14th. The voice of Pepe Fernandez, the director of its weekend morning program, said, quote, "No es un día cualquiera," was heard on the medium-wave Rene network according to a recording provided by Jorge Garzón on the Medium Wave Info blog. Medium wave technology brought us all these events, but now medium wave will cease because radio progresses as we do, the announcement translated from Spanish to English said. Now you listen to us via FM, mobile phones, smart speakers, and we are developing our own new DAB+ network. Gorka Zumeta, a Madrid-based radio and podcast consultant, reported that Spain's Ministry for Digital Transformation and Public Administration is preparing a royal decree for DAB+ implementation. The plan establishes that Rene must guarantee DAB+ coverage for 70% of Spain's population in 2026 and 85% in 2027. Zumeta described the Rene news as a bombshell. He noted that it was unusual for a Rene on-air announcement to precede any sort of press release from Radio Televisión Española. Listenership and energy costs, Zumeta said, lightly explain Rene's decision to go forward with an AM shutdown. In 2013, Zumeta cited data that showed Rene's AM broadcasts had approximately 176,000 listeners. In the latest Estudio General de Medios survey, Rene's AM broadcast registered only 69,000 listeners, 58,000 of them on the former Radio Uno and 11,000 on Radio Cinco Todo Noticias broadcasts, according to Zumeta.
You might not know it, but plans are currently in progress to launch a geostationary amateur radio satellite that would provide multi-mode communications coverage to Europe and most of North America. Future GEO is likely to be very similar to the QO-100 satellite that covers Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, the large portion of Asia. The major difference, of course, would be the inclusion of North America within future GEO's footprint, opening up geostationary satellite opportunities to one of the largest ham radio populations in the world. What that opens up is existing ham radio modes, analog and digital, utilized through an easily accessible stationary satellite. Beyond typical ham radio activities, QO-100 supports high-definition video nets throughout the use of amateur digital TV. Imagine receiving amateur radio television with similar ease to that of DirecTV or Starlink. Read just about any mainstream news article about amateur radio, and it's inevitably framed as old technology that's kept alive by a dedicated few. Maybe satellite-based video conferencing or high-speed data transfers without the use of internet begins to change those old narratives. Based on current progress and the pace at which Q100 is implemented, we could see future GEO become reality within the next 4 or 5 years. For a proposed footprint that could cover most of North America, North American entities have largely been quiet, the exception being the formation of AMSAT Canada. AMSAT NA has relayed updates from the AMSAT DL and contributed to a proposal in 2023, but very little promotion has been published to their website. This is the most exciting active development in ham radio, and if this project interests you, you can promote it, present about it at an upcoming club meeting, or mention it on the air on the local repeater.
Botan, a 1U CubeSat built by students of the Chiba Institute of Technology in Japan, was deployed from the International Space Station on October 10th via the Japanese Space Agency Kubo module. The satellite carries a Earth observation camera downloading images upon ground station command at 437.375 MHz. These downloads occur primarily when the satellite is over Japan. Botan also carries an APRS digipeater operating on 146.825 MHz. The digipeater is also activated by ground station command. Although the original design specifications called for the digipeater to remain active for 720 minutes, or 12 hours after activation, observations have shown that it is currently timing out after 480 minutes, or 8 hours. As a result, when the digipeater is activated by the command station in Japan, it has timed out before passing over portions of North America. Although the Chiba Institute has asked amateurs around the world for telemetry downloads, the attempts to make use of these satellite services have been frustrating for North American amateurs.
Rigs of every vintage and quite a few new ones will be tuned to 1.936 MHz on December 18 for pre-net check-ins at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This will be a very special edition of the Greater Cincinnati Amateur Radio Association's 1936 net. It was, in fact, October of that year when the newly formed association started hosting this regular net. The popular on-air activity came to a halt with the start of the Second World War and didn't resume until 1986, the year that the club members decided to revive it, and marked the association's 50th anniversary. The net managers are Jay, K8CJY, and Jeff, W8GNM. Bill, NM4A, is the net control operator, and an average of 65 stations check in each week. This special net is expected to last 2 hours. The pre-net check-ins, the net itself will be going at 9 p.m. Eastern. Hams around the U.S. are invited to fire up their rigs of any rigs. Tom, KD0EIL, said in a press release that this is a great opportunity to hear some classic AM rigs, heavy metal, military, broadcast AM transmitters, state-of-the-art software-defined radios, and virtually any ham radio capable of the AM mode.
The Amateur Radio Association of Bangladesh has been given a grant from the Yasmi Foundation to support its university-based campaign that has been bringing amateur radio to the next generation. It's been a busy year for the Amateur Radio Association of Bangladesh, whose members have been touring 24 university campuses as part of a formal program to bring the science and the spirit of ham radio to students. The initiative recently received a grant from the Yasmi Foundation to support the ongoing educational work. In July, the association spent time with students at the University of Liberal Arts in Bangladesh, working in collaboration with the school's Adventure Club. Other campus visits included the Canadian University of Bangladesh and ZNRF University, where the students were able to experience satellite communication. In October, Stamford University, Bangladesh, welcomed the Amateur Club. With the help of the school's Robotics Club and the IEEE student branch, the amateurs presented a workshop that showcased fundamentals of RF, satellite communication, and disaster response. The not-for-profit California-based Yasmi Foundation supports initiatives that bring amateur radio to young people, especially in developing nations, by providing grants, awards, and scholarships.
The recent saga of AM and FM radio in cars usually comes down to whether or not it is included as an option or eliminated due to electric interference within the vehicle. But a new cease and desist letter issued by Neil Ardman, the owner of Georgia-based radio company NEA Broadcasting, highlights the potential visual alteration of metadata sent by stations, including via RDS and HD radio. It stems from what he has observed in his own Porsche Taycan GTS, which is manufactured by Volkswagen. Display data sent from his stations via RDS and HD, including the HD radio artist experience, is supported by what he said is its own onboard metadata service. As an example, last month a 15-year-old in Kingsland, Georgia went missing, which is where Ardman's 106.3 WKBX FM K-Bay 106 is located. He said the station ran the boy's picture via HD Radio's Artist Experience feature in conjunction with the Camden County Sheriff's Office. He said the boy's picture showed up on most auto displays, but not on the Porsche Taycans. The Porsche's metadata, Ardman said, often will attempt to match up currently playing artist and song title data to its own database, which he cited is often either inaccurate or outdated. Ardman's stations also work with advertisers to sell spots over metadata. Those ads are not seen on the Porsche's display either. It's a slippery slope, Ardman told Radio World. Do automotive OEMs get to pick and choose which ads are sent out on the display? How is it any different than if a TV manufacturer decided to cover up certain advertisements on a television program? He is also concerned as his stations, which include coastal Georgia's WKBX and WTMP AM and FM in the Tampa-St. Petersburg area, won't be able to disseminate weather data via HD radio and RDS efficiently.
Simulations indicate that the decay of our satellite Haight-R, or SO-124, is approaching and will likely occur during the first 2 weeks of January 2026. If you can, take the opportunity to make use of this satellite, which has been working very well and has brought much joy to radio amateurs around the world. Any old FM equipment will work since the repeater is level activated and does not require a subtone. The frequencies and operating modes are 145.925 MHz uplink on FM voice with no subtone, and FSK 200 BPS, AFSK AX.25, APRS 1200 or 2400 BPS. 436.888 MHz downlink on FM voice, CW FSK 200 to 2400 BPS.
In case you didn't hear, on October 22, 2025, the Internet Archive, who hosts the Wayback Machine at archive.org, celebrated a milestone: 1 trillion web pages archived for posterity. Founded in 1996 by Brewster Colley, the organization and its facilities grew through the late 90s. In 2001, access to their archive was greatly improved by the introduction of the Wayback Machine. From their own website on October 21, 2009, they explained their mission and purpose. Most societies place importance on preserving artifacts of their culture and heritage. Without such artifacts, civilization has no memory and no mechanism to learn from its successes and failures. Our culture now produces more and more artifacts in digital form. The archive's mission is to help preserve those artifacts and create an internet library for researchers, historians, and scholars. We were curious about the Internet Archive technology. Storing a copy, in fact, 2 copies, of the Internet is no mean feat, so we did some digging to find out how it's done. The best information available is contained in an article from 2016 called 20,000 Hard Drives on a Mission. They keep 2 copies of every item, which are stored in Linux directories. In 2016, they had over 30 petabytes of content and were ingesting at a rate of 13 to 15 terabytes per day, web and television being the most voluminous. In 2016, they had around 20,000 individual disk drives, each housed in specialized computers called data nodes. The data nodes have 36 data drives, plus 2 operating system drives per machine. Data nodes are organized into racks of 10 machines, having 360 data drives per rack. These racks are interconnected via high-speed Ethernet to form a storage cluster. Even though content storage tripled from 2012 to 2016, the count of disk drives stayed about the same. This is because of disk drive technology improvements. Data nodes that were once populated with 36 individual 2 terabyte drives are today filled with 8 terabyte drives, moving single node capacity from 72 terabytes to 288 terabytes or 259.2 terabytes formatted in the same physical space. The evolution of disk density did not happen in a single step, so there are populations of 2, 3, 4, and 8 terabyte drives in the storage clusters. We will leave you with the visual styling of Hackaday Beta in 2004 and what an early Google.com or Amazon.com looked like back in the day. Super big shout out to the Internet Archive. Thanks for providing such an invaluable service to our community, and congratulations on this excellent achievement.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard on nets and repeaters around the country and around the world on great repeater systems like WA3PBD repeater system, on Thursday evenings at 7:30 p.m. on 146.730 and 223.940, covering all of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and beyond. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.